Hare Krishna. Thank you all for returning. Let's begin with a little bit of kirtan. Sorry I'm a few minutes late. Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Yashoda Nandana Braja Janaranjana Yashoda Nandana Braja Janaranjana Yashoda Nandana Braja Janaranjana Yashoda Nandana Braja Yashodanandana Braja Janara Yashodanandana Braja Janara Jamuna Tira Vanachari Jamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Madan Mohan ki jai, Shri Singhadev ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Granthra Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Gaur Premanandi ki. Is there a book stand for? Thank you. Hare Krishna. So thank you all so much for returning for the third and final part of this seminar. Thank you. I want to actually start by expressing my appreciation for His Grace Vaisheshika Prabhu and Nirakula Mataji. Although they're not present here physically today, I really feel so much gratitude towards both of them. A community can be known by the quality of its leaders, and the quality of the leaders can be known by the quality of the community. And in both cases, what we have here is something extraordinary in the quality of the community and in the leadership. And that is no coincidence. They've always been such a wonderful example of devotion and deep study, along with a real fire for giving Krishna consciousness to others. And that combination is actually quite rare in this world. People are often very good at one and not so good at the other. But Vaisheshika Prabhu has always been so steady in both, so enthusiastic, so expert in both. So my gratitude to them, also to Srivas Pandit Prabhu and Mother Malini for hosting me as they do each year in their home. Very kind to do that and make me feel at home. And to all of you for attending the seminars year after year, and for making me feel welcome here, and for giving me this opportunity to speak about Krishna in these different ways. So today's the third part of the seminar. If you recall, the first part yesterday was about how do we approach Krishna with the goal of communicating effectively with him when we have a prayer or a need, right? And we started off by talking about why it's okay to approach Krishna, why it's in fact very desirable to approach Krishna. And then we talked about the steps for approaching Krishna. The first being offering of obeisances to him, or bowing down, pranama. And we talked about the different levels of offering obeisances as an expression of God's supremacy and our smallness, as an offering of our false ego, as a offering of our body, mind, and words, and finally as a full offering of our heart. Then we spoke about praising Krishna before we actually make the final step, which is the ask itself. In the second part of the seminar, we talked about then what can we expect in terms of Krishna's response. And we looked at the example particularly of Krishna's response to the demigods when they ask for protection. Krishna says three things. He says, I know, I understand your situation. We talked about the meaning of anukampa, Krishna's empathy as a form of mercy. We talked about how he is, and then how he says, he makes a promise that he will take care of Hiranyakashipu, and that promise is expressed over and over again by Krishna, and it's something that he never fails in. But then we talked about the catch, which is the fact that even though Krishna will help, he says that we have to wait until the time he decides to help. Not only until that time, but also in the way that he wants to help, right? And so there we talked about the different ways in which Krishna protects his devotees. Sometimes physically, sometimes mentally, sometimes spiritually, always spiritually. And so, and we talked about what we do when we don't feel Krishna's protection, when we feel a sense of absence. And we discussed the journey of faith that occurs, as well as developing our own personal collection of instances when Krishna has acted in our life, and taking advantage of that library when we are in difficult, challenging circumstances ourselves. So that's a recap of the last day, the last two parts of the seminar. But the part that we missed out in all of this so far is the important role, the essential role, the indispensable role of Krishna's holy names. In fact, if we are not able to do any of these steps because we forget, or we're out of practice, or the situation is too much of an emergency, whatever the situation might be, everything can be both enhanced and replaced by Krishna's name. So powerful is this one factor of prayer. Of course, there is so much to say about Krishna's holy names. It's a limitless subject. So clearly, we're not going to even scratch the surface here. I want to look at the subject of Krishna's names, particularly in this element, in its relationship to prayer. And today we'll look at Krishna's names from a philosophical perspective. We will look at it from an experiential perspective, right? So both philosophical and in terms of the lived experience of the devotee. And finally, I will end with a little special treat for all of us, okay? So I want to actually begin, not with Bhagavatam, but with another great author that many of us may be familiar with, and that is William Shakespeare. There's this famous line in Shakespeare that I think it's worth reflecting on. Prabhupada actually quotes from Shakespeare a surprising number of times. Actually, it's not surprising. Prabhupada was educated in the British educational system, and Shakespeare was required reading, as it is most places around the world in English medium schools. So Prabhupada quotes from Hamlet and shows a knowledge of Macbeth and many different plays if you read his books. A Merchant of Venice is another one, right? So this one is about the name, and it comes particularly from Romeo and Juliet. And there's this famous passage, this soliloquy. Shakespeare is famous for many things, but particularly his soliloquies, when the actor, one of the main actors, stands up and delivers a speech of some kind. And this one is spoken by Juliet. Romeo and Juliet are madly in love with each other, but there is one major problem. Anyone know what that problem is? Yeah, so they're both from different families, right? In Indian context, we might say it's an intercaste relationship, right? They're both, because the British had their own system of hierarchy, of social hierarchies. And so they cannot publicly get together and express their love. They can't be married because he is a Montague and she is a Capulet. Capulet? 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 Okay. Okay, so here's her words, okay? Please listen carefully. They're very, Shakespeare is a great writer. So he says, there's actually several famous lines. Juliet says, "O Romeo, Romeo, wherefore art thou Romeo?" So this line, "Wherefore art thou Romeo," most people misunderstand to say meaning, "Where are you, Romeo?" But wherefore means why. Why are you Romeo? Okay, and we'll see why she's questioning this. "O Romeo, Romeo, wherefore art thou Romeo? Deny thy father and refuse thy name, or if thou wilt not, be but sworn, my love, and I'll no longer be a Capulet. 'Tis but thy name that is my enemy. 'Tis but thy name that is my enemy. Thou art thyself, though not a Montague. What's Montague? It is nor hand, nor foot, nor arm, nor face, nor any other part belonging to a man. Oh, be some other name. What's in a name? That which we call a rose by any other name would smell as sweet. So Romeo would, were he not Romeo called, retain that dear perfection which he owes without that title. Romeo, doff thy name, and for that name which is no part of thee, take all myself." So I want to take up Juliet's question for us today and ask ourselves, what's in a name? She asks very wonderfully, she says, what's in a name? That which we call a rose by any other name would smell as sweet. Right? What's in a name? I think this is a very good question worth reflecting on. Right? What's in a name? And clearly, Juliet here is not satisfied with what's in a name. She's got a very negative experience with the quality of names, right? And we also know, of course, that names are very positive in their own way as well. So let's start with the negative question. What's in a name? What is it negative? What's not pleasant? What's terrible about a name that Juliet is responding to, reacting to here? What's her problem with a name? Can anyone say? Can anyone offer? Okay. Say that again. Yeah. It's the identification of the name with the body. And why is that an issue for her? She likes Romeo, she likes the way he looks, she doesn't have a problem with his body.
It's just the title that is kind of holding her back. If it is any other name or any other title, then it shouldn't have been a problem.
Yes. It's what that name conveys, right? Her challenge with names is that names are a mode of labeling people in this world, right? When we have a particular name, just like in India, people's last names are often connected to their caste identity, right? And so people today will often change their last name because they don't want to be identified with that particular caste. Whether it's positive or it's negative, that connotation brings all kinds of baggage with us, right? So she's complaining because a name, she says, is a way of labeling people that colors our perception of them and prevents us from seeing who they actually are. She's saying, Romeo, if only people saw who you were, it wouldn't matter the fact that you are Romeo Montague, right? That this name is your identity. That's the problem. Names in this world, the Upanishads describe that there's two factors, two features of this world that are so particularly problematic: nama and rupa. We always think of these items as positive, but the Upanishads mention these as the signature markers of temporary material existence: name and form. Take a gold earring, right? You could take that gold earring, you could melt it and make a gold necklace. You could melt it again and turn it into a gold ring. It's all gold, but the rupa, the form, changes from one to another. And then we name it differently each time. So the Upanishads say nama and rupa, these two things are superficial and temporary, okay? Superficial and temporary. They are merely labels that do not describe what is actually underneath. This feature of names in Sanskrit is called upadhi. Upadhi means that which is, it comes from the idea of placement, that which is placed upon something else, but is not actually what it is, right? Or that which is conceived of as that thing, but is not actually what it is. That is upadhi, right? So my identity as Gupta, right, brings with it, that surname brings with it certain connotations. My identity as a professor, my identity as someone who lives in Utah, right? Immediately, those associations bring certain connotations in people's minds. Oh, if he's a professor, he's probably absent-minded, right? That's immediately a connotation that comes in people's minds, right? Because it goes with my upadhi. Now, am I absent-minded or not? That only someone who actually knows me would be able to tell. But for someone who hears that upadhi, immediately there's a connotation connected to it, right? So with every one of our labels, our race, our nationality, so on, that upadhi is connected. And there is no upadhi that encompasses all of that as effectively as does someone's name. In that name, all those upadhis are attached to it, right? They're connected to that person's identity. This is this world's biggest problem with a name. This is Juliet's problem with the name. That names are superficial, they are modes of labeling people. And this is why in the Sandarbhas, Srila Jiva Goswami spends a lot of time talking about Krishna's name and those things connected to Krishna as having two major characteristics. He insists, he emphasizes that when we speak of Krishna's names, these problems do not exist. Why? Because Krishna's names are swabhavika and aprakrita. They are non-material, aprakrita, and they're swabhavika. They're part of Krishna's own nature. They are not external things applied to him. Let's take a minute to think about this fact in relation to the name. Because it's important. Jiva Goswami spends much of the Bhagavat Sandarbha, the second of the 6 Sandarbhas, going over this point over and over and over again in relation to every aspect of Krishna's being. His name, his form, his abode, his associates, his jewelry and his clothing. Everything he says is part of Krishna's own nature and therefore non-material. Why? Why is that so important? Why could Krishna not be spiritual and something connected to Krishna, like his dhoti, be material? Why could Krishna not have that essential spiritual nature and this dhoti be external to his spiritual nature? Here's why. If Krishna, anything connected to Krishna is material, that is not spiritual, it would mean that Krishna is connected to, is covered by, is dependent on that which is not spiritual. And all of a sudden, Krishna's spiritual identity becomes relative rather than absolute. One of the most common phrases that Srila Prabhupada uses to describe Krishna or to describe spiritual reality, he says, is the absolute truth. Right? Have you thought about what this word absolute means? Absolute is the opposite of relative. That which is relative is not absolute. That which is absolute is not relative. What does relative mean? Relative means that your existence is dependent on the existence of something else. Right? Just like if I asked you, I said, who are you? What's the first thing you might tell me? You'd probably tell me your name, right? Then I said, well, tell me a little more. Who are you? Then you'd probably add to that the place where you live, maybe the work that you do, maybe the name of your parents. It depends on cultures, actually, how people, what order in which they define themselves. Some cultures, they'll begin with talking about their parents and their heritage. Others, they'll begin by talking about their work. Here in the United States, we generally start with the work. Right? In other cultures, they begin with their heritage, with their pedigree. But in any case, as soon as you start describing yourself, you have made yourself relative. Your existence is relative to someone else's. If your parents did not exist, would you exist today in the form you are? No, you would not. Your identity, your name today would not be who you are. If San Jose did not exist, would you exist in the way you are? No, you wouldn't, right? You wouldn't have the job you have. You would be located somewhere else. You may not have had the same economic opportunities. You might have taken a different career altogether. You may be living a very different quality of life. If your employer did not exist, if your company did not exist, if technology did not exist at the level it is, would you exist in the way you are? No. Think about how many factors went into play just for you to get here this morning. How many things your existence was dependent upon, was relative to. You woke up this morning and you got out of bed. That means you had some sleep. If you didn't have any sleep, it would be very difficult to show up, right? So your sleep was dependent on so many factors. Perhaps the presence of air conditioning on an extremely hot night. Perhaps the maker of the bed in which you were sleeping, right? Perhaps the fact that everyone else in your house was not shouting and screaming till midnight. You were dependent on them also. Then you got into your car. How many people were you dependent upon in order to get into that car and to drive? The makers of the car, the company that produced it, all the different people who went into creating the parts of that vehicle. Most important, gasoline, right? And the fact that we're able to transport it, to bring it out. Your journey this morning was probably dependent on someone in Saudi Arabia who was pumping that gas maybe 6 months ago, right? How incredible is that? How much are we dependent upon others? And then when you drove down the street, did you pass anyone coming in the opposite direction? Yes, and you were dependent on them staying in their lane. Because if they didn't, and there was no prediction, right, you were just completely based on faith that they would not veer into your lane, you would not be here right now, right? How many factors? We could go on. We are not the absolute truth. We are a relative truth. And therefore, our existence is not independent. It's dependent on so many. We are not swatantra, we are paratantra. Because there are 1,000 things external to us upon which we are dependent. Krishna is the absolute truth, right? Brahman. This is the definition of what is Brahman. Right? The absolute truth. This means that his existence is not dependent on any external factor, which means that everything connected to Krishna must be Krishna or Krishna's energy. It must be part of him. Whenever Krishna acts in this world, he comes with everyone and everything. He descends with his abode. And that abode, he's not dependent upon because it's him, right? That Dhamma is none other than a form of Lord Balaram, who is also none other than Krishna. Even this material world is Krishna's energy. It's not external to him. It's one and different from him. Krishna's dhoti, if it were material, it means Krishna was covered by something material, isn't it? So no, it's spiritual. And it's not even different than him. It's swabhavika, it's part of his own nature. So he's not dependent on the cloth maker. He's not dependent on the vehicle maker. He's not dependent on any makers because he is the one and only maker of everything that exists. The unmoved mover, as Aristotle says. The one mover behind which there is no one to move, right? We move one thing and we are moved by something else. But Krishna is unmoved by anyone. He is the unmoved mover who pushes everything. He is the absolute truth against which everyone is relative, in relation to which everything else exists. We are relative to Krishna. Krishna is independent. He is swatantra. This is why the word aham, when Krishna says I, that word truly only applies to Krishna. The word aham is actually Krishna's name. It means I. There's 3 different persons. There's he, she, or it. There is you, and there is I. When we're speaking about that. I'm speaking to you, and I am the one speaking, right? So I, you, and them over there. 3 persons. They and you are relative beings because you're related to the speaker. Aham, or I, is the only independent subject, right? And this is why in Sanskrit, I is called Uttama Purusha, which means the best person. This is Krishna. Krishna is the only Uttama Purusha. Why? Because he is Purushottama, right? This is his name. This is why throughout the Bhagavad Gita, what's the most frequent name given to Krishna? Aham. Krishna uses this name for himself over and over and over again. Aham sarvasya prabhavo. Matta. Mat is just another form of the first person pronoun, aham. Aham sarvasya prabhavo. Matta sarvam pravartate. Iti matva bhajante mam buddha bhava samanvita. Mattah parataram nanyat kinchidasti dhananjaya. Mai sarvam idam protam sutre manigana iva. Raso ham apsukonteya prabhasmi. 10th chapter of Bhagavad Gita is just that. It's aham, 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 aham. And when Krishna says aham, 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 it's beautiful because he is the I, the independent, absolute I. Prabhupada has this wonderful purport in Bhagavatam where he describes the importance of this I, the original absolute I, as belonging to Krishna. He says in Bhagavatam, aham evasam evagre. In the beginning, there was only I. I was the only one who was there. Because I'm the only absolute, the only unmoved mover. That is belonging to Krishna. That is his name. Because he is the only one who can stand up and say, I, and not have anyone else involved in the picture. He's the only one who can say, I do this, and no one else is involved. We cannot. Even when we say, I do this, there's you and there's them, always there in the picture. Always there's other people involved. This is why when we try to claim this name, this title of aham for ourselves, what is it called? Ahamkara, right? It's called ahankara. Ahankara means, kara means to construct. It's a constructed I. It's a false ego. It's something that is made, that is built, that is superficial. It's the upadhi. When we stand up and say, aham, 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 Krishna describes this kind of aham in Bhagavad Gita. This improperly placed aham. When the relative person stands up and says, aham, 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 Krishna says, this is the factor, this is the feature of the demoniac person. Ishvaroham aham bhogi, siddhoham balavan sukhi. This is how Krishna describes the demoniac person. The demoniac person says, Ishvaroham. I am the Ishvara. Ishvaroham. Aham bhogi. I am the enjoyer. Siddhoham. I am perfect. Balavan sukhi. I'm powerful and I'm happy. Right? That's what it sounds like when we use that word. Because we are not aham. We are tvam. We are the other person, always in relation to Krishna. Krishna is the only subject. We are always the object in relation to Krishna. He is the only absolute. We are the only relative. Therefore, aham belongs to him. And this is why Jiva Goswami spends so much time explaining that the name of Krishna is non-different from Krishna. We are relatives to our name. Names are upadhis, they're labels upon us. But in relation to Krishna, Nama Chintamani Krishnas, Chaitanya Rasa Vigraha, Purna Shuddho Nityamukto, Abhinnatvat Nama Naminaha. That the name of Krishna is transcendental. Therefore, there is no difference between Krishna and his holy names. Everything connected to Krishna has two properties. They are Swabhavika and Aprakrita. They are transcendental and they are non-material. In this way, Krishna's name is different than the sorts of names that we find here. It does not contain the problem that Juliet is so concerned about. What's in a name? Would not a rose by any other name smell just as sweet? In this world, yes. Right? It doesn't matter what you call it, rose or gulab or whatever. It's still fragrant, it's still sweet, and it still has those thorns, right? Everything in this world has good and bad. But Krishna, would Krishna by any other name smell as sweet? And the answer is no, because there is no way to distinguish Krishna from his name. The two are one. They're absolute. So that's the philosophical groundwork, okay, for the name. The name as upadhi in this world, and the name as non-different from Krishna, as abhinna, as aprakrita, as swabhavika in the spiritual realm. So that's the negative side of the name, okay, that we've dealt with, and hopefully shown why that negative characteristic of the name does not apply to the name of Krishna, the labeling feature of it, the way in which it forces us down, right? It pulls us down. No, it's not connected. But now, let us think of more positive answers to Juliet's question. What's in a name? What's in a name? I want you to think about this, reflect upon it. And now think positively. What functions do names play in our life, in our world? Just think about your own experience with names. What does a name do? What's in a name? Anyone? Yes. You can pass the mic. Thank you.
Hare Krishna. Names add a personal connection, a personal touch. Someone might have a nickname. For example, parents might call their children with something special, like a nickname or pet name.
Yes.
Similarly, lovers might have different names for each other that are unique to them. So names are a way to make a relationship personal.
Exactly. Very nice point. Wonderful point, right? Names are a way of making things personal in relation to another. And they are so personal, in fact, that we often reserve nicknames for specific people, right? Someone else might hear us being called by that name, and they start calling us like, no, not you, right? That you don't call me that, right? For you, I'm this, right? Just call me my regular name. So it's a very personal connection we have as a result of names. Very nice. What else? Yes, Prabhu.
I think one famous person says this is the most sweetest thing in the world to hear our own name.
Yes. So we love our names, right? Why is our name so sweet to us, right? Why do we love it so much? Even as Juliet is complaining about Romeo's names, she can't stop chanting them, right? Oh, Romeo. 10 times in this one paragraph, she's chanting Romeo, Romeo again, right? It's for us, our name is very, very sweet because it immediately identifies us distinctively, uniquely, right? They're talking about me. If I say, hey man, right? It's not very sweet because man can refer to another 3 billion people, or 4 billion in this world, right? It's not something that is distinctive. It's not something that is connected uniquely to me. They say, no, I've got a name. Call me by my name, right? Good, very nice. What else is there? Yes, Prabhu.
It also indicates the character or qualities of the person. So that creates an impression of attraction or aversion towards that person.
Yes. So names, very nice point. Names contain, they tell us about a person's character, their identity, their qualities. We'll talk about this more in just a moment. Thank you very much. Any other? Yes.
Hare Krishna. Someone's name also is associated with all the memories you have with that person.
Yes.
So if someone just mentions my younger brother's name to me, all the good and bad memories I have with that kid come to my mind immediately. So
Yes.
even though he's not here, I can still, whereas if you're just saying, that person, it's harder to think about or associate memories or pastimes with them.
Yes. We'll talk about this more in a lot of detail, right? But names contain our relationship with that person, and they carry that relationship inside. Excellent point. Very nice. Thank you. Anything else? Yes, there.
I think it also kind of like gives the sense of community. It's like if 5 people know a person, and if we are just by the name, there is this sense of relationship that we have with that whole community, and then suddenly we feel like, okay, we are all one, we are in this together. Kind of builds that, it's beyond just that one person, it connects a group of people.
That's a brilliant point. That's really, really good. Names are not just markers of individuals and individual relationships. They're also markers of community. There are people who will be associated with that particular person through their name, right? And once we know that name, we know something, we have some connection amongst each other. So if there's a fan club, for example, then they'll all be surrounded around, they're all Swifties, right? They're all connected with that person. Or if there's a group of people who don't like someone, like in politics, right? That'll bring them together in a very close way. But also when we have relationships, we have networks of relationships. All of social media is based on this, right? It's networks of relationships based on name recognition. Excellent. Thank you very much.
Names can be a way of marking new beginnings. For example, in some Indian families, when after marriage, the husband gives the wife a new name, and the wife changes her name after marriage. Yeah. Or, for example, at initiation, the spiritual master gives the disciple a new name. So.
Yes, wonderful point, right? A name is a marker of creation, of beginning. The person who creates has the right to name. When parents create a child, they name that child, right? That makes that child theirs. They claim possession over the child because it is their product. This person belongs to them. When a scientist invents something, they get to name that. If they discover a disease, they have the dubious benefit of having that disease named after them, right? Because why? They are the ones who discovered it, right? This is my disease, right? So whoever creates something has the right to name. And this is why when the spiritual master gives birth, spiritual birth to the disciple, then the guru has the right to name the disciple, right? So new beginnings are connected with new names because creation is connected with names. This is why, according to the Vedas, names and language must precede creation. They're not a product of creation. Language, the Vedas, always comes before. Why? Because when something is created, it is created only when it receives a name, right? When Brahma is able to name that thing and say, this is what it is. This is my son. This is my daughter. This is the beginning of this species, this form of life. Very nice. Okay, so of course there's so many aspects and we could go forward. But I want to sort of summarize the functions of names in 3 ways that I've been reflecting upon. Okay. First, and what I'm going to describe has already been said by all of you, right? So I'm kind of bringing it together and elaborating a little bit. But your points were excellent. So first, a name is a way to identify and to distinguish someone. As I said, creation requires language, which requires the process of naming. It's the first thing we do. In fact, when we go to a doctor, we have a disease, the first thing the doctor has to do is name the disease. Once the disease is named, then only treatment can begin. That's called diagnosis. And immediately now you have some understanding. Okay, what is it that is going on? So this aspect of, in Krishna's case, right, his names identify and distinguish who he is by his qualities. Remember the episode in the 10th canto when Garga Muni is invited to name Krishna at the name-giving ceremony. It happens in a little cowshed. And they're all sitting there, and what does Garga Muni do? He goes through the different qualities of this boy. He says, because this boy has this quality, therefore he has this name. And because this boy has this quality, therefore he is called Sankarshan. Because he has this quality, he is called Balaram. Because he has this quality, he is called Krishna. And he will be known in this way as well. And that name-giving process is not exclusively Garga Muni's. Even as Garga Muni gives names to Krishna, his devotees throughout Krishna's pastimes give names to him. He continues to gain those names. Damodara, Makhanchor, Kamsari, right? Every time he does something, he gets a name, right? And in this way, because the name can only be given by the one who creates, by the one who possesses, by the one who has. Therefore, in this way, Krishna demonstrates that he belongs to every one of his devotees. Because not just Garga Muni, not just Devaki and Vasudev, not just Mother Yashoda, but every one of his devotees has the right, the ability to name Krishna. This is why Nam Akari Bahudha. Krishna has so many different names, thousands of names. Because every devotee names Krishna because of his qualities, and as a result says, Krishna is mine. They possess Krishna. So the second way in which names act is it's a way to call, to address. And calling and addressing are so powerful in a person's life. A person must respond to a call to their name. It's that someone who calls upon our name practically possesses us as a result of that, right? Just like if I said, Kapil Prabhu, immediately he looked at me. He was looking there and he looked right at me, right? And if I say, Kapil Prabhu, I need some water, then in that moment, right, I have his full attention and I've controlled him, right? I've exerted control over him through his name. Now, he may resist that. He has a choice. Yes, I'll get water, or no, I don't want to give water, right? But that's a choice he has to make. He cannot be indifferent, is my point. Names are so powerful as a way of controlling, possessing someone. This is why people give so much thought when they name a child, isn't it? Because that name throughout their life will exert control over them. It will possess them. Anyone has the capacity to get their attention, to make them respond just by calling upon their name. If that name is auspicious, it will create an auspicious environment around them. If that name displays particular qualities, it will instill those qualities in that person. It will evoke those qualities there. Therefore, all of Krishna's different qualities and his attributes and his pastimes can be evoked from his names, right? They can be pulled out from his names because those names are repositories of those methods of identifying, of calling upon Krishna. So there are ways of identifying, distinguishing. There are ways of calling and addressing. Calling and addressing to the point of even controlling, right? And when we call sincerely upon Krishna's names, Krishna has no choice but to respond, to pay attention. This is why names are such an essential part of the process of prayer. Because if we just go up to Krishna and say, "Oh, you, please pay attention to me," Krishna can ignore us. Because many yous in this world, right? Many generic persons are out there. But when we call upon Krishna's names, like with Kapil Prabhu, right? He has no choice but to pay attention. Now, then he may choose to accept our demand or reject it, right? That's up to him, as we talked about yesterday. But he must pay attention. That is the power of anyone's name, including Krishna, that it has the power to grab our attention like nothing else in this world. Even the screaming of fire does not have the ability to capture our attention as effectively as our name does. And the same is true with Krishna. When devotees call out upon him, Govinda Pundarikaksha Rakshamam Sharanagatam. This is how Draupadi addresses the Lord in the game of dice, right? When she's being harassed by Dushasana. She puts her hands in the air and says, Govinda Pundarikaksha Rakshamam Sharanagatam. What's the first word that comes out of her mouth? Govinda, right? And then Krishna, thousands of miles away in Dwarka, his attention is there, right? He's right there. He's attentive. Someone said Govinda. That's me. When Ajamil called out at the moment of death, right? The words he said were, Narayana, Narayana, come here. Prabhupada has this one lecture where he says, he just had to say it once. Right? Just had to say it once, that's all. Just once he said Narayana, and the Lord said, oh, it's me. Actually, this is a little bit technical, but Panini has a sutra in his grammar that says that when you have Narayana, is Nara plus Ayana, right? Ayana. So this Ayana doesn't have the na sound to it. It's not a retroflex. It's just na, Ayana. But he says when it becomes a retroflex, Ayana, then it refers to a proper name. It refers to someone's name, an individual. So the word Narayana, this is a point that Sri Vaishnavas make many times, that the word Narayana is not anyone who is the shelter of all human beings. That's what it means. Nara refers to the collection of human beings, and Ayana means their destination or their path. One who is the destination of all beings, maybe it's Lord Shiva, maybe it's Lord Brahma, maybe it's, the President of the United States, the shelter of all beings. No, Narayana, with that retroflex, now refers to a proper name. Ajamil just had to say it once. Oh, Narayana. And Krishna said, oh, me? Right? He had his attention. Okay, immediately Krishna protected, but he needed more time to go back to Godhead before he could go home. But Krishna's attention was immediately taken, right? When Hanumanji does anything for the first time, how does he begin? Hey Ram, right? With the name of Ram. Jai Shri Ram. Before that, nothing can happen. The Lord's attention is immediately taken. Krishna has control over everything in this world. Everyone and everything. This is the only way we have control over Krishna, is through his name. This is the one thing, the one gift. This is why in Shikshashtaka, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is glorifying Krishna's names. Why it is such a special gift that Krishna gives us. Because in the name, Krishna gives us a power that we do not deserve, which is the power to get his attention, the power to call him whenever we want. That is the power that a master has over a servant. Come here. And yet, even though we are Krishna's servants, and even though Krishna is the master of all, in his holy names, Krishna gives us this undeserved gift, this undeserved power where we have the ability to possess him, to call him, to remind him of who he is and why he should be protecting us. In the Bhagavad Gita, it's so nicely described in Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur's commentary and also in Srila Prabhupada's purports, right? Every time Arjun calls Krishna by a name, Prabhupada explains, this is why he's calling him as a name, right? He says, Senayor ubhayor madhye ratham sthapaya mechyuta. He says, O Achyuta, place my chariot between the two armies. And Srila Prabhupada says the reason he's calling him Achyuta is he's reminding Krishna, Krishna, you never fail in helping your devotees. So now don't back down. I need your help in this situation. He calls Krishna Madhusudana. Why? Because he's reminding Krishna, you killed the demon Madhu, and yet here I am in this very inauspicious circumstance, in this terrible, and you're not helping me destroy my demons in this situation. Arjun is using Krishna's names to get his attention, to influence his behavior, to remind him of what his duties are towards the devotee. This is why names are so powerful in relation to prayer. Krishna, of course, encompasses everything, that name. But find a name that you love. Find a name that is appropriate, that is powerful for the circumstance you are in, and call Krishna by that name in your prayer. If you want him to steal away your heart, if that's your prayer, call him Makhanchor, call him Chittachor. If you want him to help you because you are falling down that cliff, call him Achyuta, call him Sharanagata Vatsala. Find a name that gets Krishna's attention and reminds him of who he is. Throughout Srimad Bhagavatam, we find that devotees choose his names very carefully. When the Brahmastra comes before Arjun, he says, Krishna, Krishna, Mahabaho. Why is he calling Krishna Mahabaho? It's not a coincidence, right? They're not sitting to have prasad and he's saying Mahabaho, right? You don't need Mahabaho to eat prasad together. It's because he needs Mahabaho, Krishna, the all-powerful one who has very strong arms in order to deal with this Brahmastra weapon. Isn't it? When the Brahmastra comes to Uttara and is coming towards her womb to kill Maharaj Parikshit, who's within the womb, she calls out to the Lord, Pahi, Pahi, Mahayogin. What does he call him? Mahayogin. Oh, supreme mystic. Why mystic? Because Krishna needs to demonstrate some mystical ability here. The person he's protecting, the child he's protecting, is not out here, he's in here. And who can protect a child in the womb except one who can enter within it? And that requires mystical power. And Krishna shows that he is Yogeshwara. He enters within the womb of Uttara and protects the unborn child. Right? You'll find over and over again when devotees pray, the name is not random. It is carefully selected. Selected because that is the feature of Krishna they are remembering. Whatever aspect of Krishna you are remembering, there's a name to go with it. Because as I said in number 1, the first characteristic is that they identify Krishna's qualities. So names identify, they distinguish, they show Krishna's qualities. Names call, they address, they control, they possess. That's the most powerful aspect of names. And finally, the third and deepest aspect of the name is that the names serve as repositories of the devotee's own emotions and feelings and relationship for Krishna. I remember when we were thinking about names for our first child, Chaitanya, then there was a name that I liked very much. And I suggested it to my wife, and she said, no. Why? Because she knew someone with that name she didn't like. And that name brought back those memories, right? Those associations, those connotations. In the end, His Holiness Gopal Krishna Maharaj named our child. And now, all those connections in our relationship with Maharaj are found within his names, right? When we remember his name, when we're not upset or that kind of thing, when we're happy and we're remembering and we're reminiscing, the first thing that comes to mind is this name was given by Gopal Krishna Maharaj, right? And our relationship with him. When it was time to give his name, he had just come back from the hospital. I called him and I said, Maharaj, please give a name for our firstborn. And he said, okay, what are the letters from astrologically. And there were a few, and one of them was Ja. And Gopal Krishna Maharaj said, people often want very unique names for their child, very creative names. I'm not very good at giving unique names. I said, Maharaj, it's okay. We don't need a unique name. We just want you to give the name. And so then he said, okay, if the letter is Cha, you should name him Chaitanya. And if you want, you can add a middle name of your liking. And I have always loved this name of Mahaprabhu, Chaitanya Chandra. Right? It's such a beautiful name. It comes from the first time I read this little booklet by Prabodhananda Saraswati called Chaitanya Chandramrita, the Nectar of Chaitanya Chandra. Amazing little book, amazing book. And when I read that book, it was just such a wonderful experience. So anyway, so at that point I thought, okay, Chandra is perfect, right? So Chaitanya Chandra. So now, the feelings of our relationship with Gopal Krishna Maharaj, the feelings of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in relation to Prabodhananda Saraswati and his glorification, and my feelings for my own son are all wrapped into the name Chaitanya Chandra. Right? It's all there. It's all included. So names are repositories of our relationship with a particular individual. Think of the name like a cup. Within the name, we can fill it with our feelings, our relationships, our connections to a person. Perhaps you have a name of someone you don't like, and as soon as you hear the name, all kinds of negative emotions come, right? All kinds of tension and worry and anxiety, right? Distaste, just because you heard that name. And perhaps you have the name of someone you love, and as soon as you hear that name, all kinds of wonderful feelings come, right? So Krishna's name is exactly the same way. When we chant Krishna's names, we should do so attentively. We should do it carefully. Prabhupada says, he has this very nice purport where he describes that the chanting of Krishna's names needs to require the movement of the upper and lower lips, right? And the jaw, something like that he says. I forget the exact phrasing. He specifies what parts of the mouth need to be involved because he knows we have a tendency to go, which is neither the upper lip nor the lower lip nor the jaw, right? So Prabhupada actually specifies, right? So it requires some good karma, some action to do this, right? We have to act properly. This is karma yoga. We have to know why we are chanting Krishna's names. That was the first part of today's class. This is non-different from Krishna. That's an intellectual understanding of what is so different, what is so powerful about Krishna's names. That is jnana yoga. But then, not only do we chant with meaning, not only do we chant with action, but we chant with feeling. This is a point my spiritual master, Hanumat Preshaka Swami, he makes many, many times. He says we have to chant on the level of karma, jnana, and bhakti. The physical is the bare minimum. We have to actually say the words, right? We have to actually say the words, not something else, not slur them. The meaning, if we don't feel anything, at least we can convince ourselves intellectually, philosophically. This is why it's important. This is why I have to chant. Because this is what Krishna's names are, right? Cheto, darpanamarjanam, bhavamaha, davagni. This is what they do. They will cleanse my heart. But every once in a while, if we're chanting nicely, we might be able to chant with feeling. And we might be able to take that name, the cup of the holy name, and fill it with all the feelings that we have towards Krishna. Because all of us have a long-term relationship with Krishna. Just as I have a long-term relationship with my sons, and their names are filled with my relationship with them when I hear those names, so we all have a relationship with Krishna in the same way. Remember yesterday I was talking about how we can draw upon our personal library, our personal Bhagavatam, of the ways in which Krishna has acted in our lives? We can relish that, we can remember it, we can take shelter of that as time goes on and recognize that Krishna is there with me. Where do we keep, where do we store that personal library of ours? It is in Krishna's names. When we chant Krishna's names, everything we have experienced in relation to Krishna in our lives should be right there. When we say Krishna, then the ways in which He has protected me, the ways in which He has been absent, the ways in which He has rescued me, the ways in which He has loved me and reciprocated me with me, the ways in which I have found Him through the pages of Bhagavatam, through His names, through the association of devotees. My experiences in Krishna consciousness should all be right there in Krishna's names. It is the cup from which we drink every day. But here's the most beautiful thing. Chanting of Krishna's names, kirtan, this is not a monologue. It's not just us talking to Krishna. It is a dialogue. Because Krishna fills everything He has into His names as well. What does Mahaprabhu says? Nam nam akari bahudha nija sarva shaktis tatrarpita. Tatrarpita means filling. He has poured it. He has bestowed nija sarva shaktis. Everything, every energy, every power, every relationship that Krishna has with us, He's put it into His name. And He's giving it to us and saying, drink, take this. This is why devotees throughout our literature talk about the holy names like nectar. Nectar is something you drink. And you drink it with your mouth. And they ask, were there 1,000 mouths I had to drink your holy names, it would not be enough. Krishna has filled everything into this cup. All His power, all His relationship with us, all His affection, His care for us, over so many lifetimes. Think about it. Krishna has been with us in every lifetime for millions of lives. From a cockroach to Lord Brahma, He's stuck by us. That takes a lot of feeling, affection, relationship. It takes a lot of commitment. And that commitment He has for us, He's put it into His name. And He's saying, drink. And what is He asking for from us? Once you drink, you fill that name with your relationship with me and give it back to me. This is why Krishna's holy names is the best offering to Krishna. Because it gives Him something that then He can relish as well. That's all He's asking. He's saying, I'm giving you a full cup of nectar to drink. You drink it and then give it back to me. Fill it with your best and let me taste it. This is why the chanting of Krishna's holy names feels so different when it comes from a pure devotee, from someone who actually has feeling for Krishna. You know, when Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he would hear Krishna's name, he would chant Krishna's name, it would send him into an ecstatic fit of ecstasy. Why? Because when we chant Krishna's names, we're filling it with our experience, our relationship, our love for Him. When Chaitanya Mahaprabhu chants Krishna's names, imagine what he's filling into that name. How much is present, the intensity of it. It's so intense, that exchange, that he cannot handle it, right? The body is not capable of holding on to that intensity, and therefore it manifests in the forms of these ecstasies called the Ashta Sattvika Vikara, the 8 symptoms of ecstasy, right? Like trembling and crying and so on. Why does that happen? Because the cup is overflowing. It cannot hold that much, right? And it bursts forth in the form of ecstatic symptoms. This is why when we hear Krishna's holy names from the mouth of a pure devotee, when we hear Srimad Bhagavatam from the mouth of a pure devotee, it has a different effect upon our hearts than if we heard it from someone who's just reciting it professionally, or just doing it because it's their duty or because it's a livelihood, right? Nigama kalpataror galitam phalam shukha mukhad amritad dravasam yutam pibata bhagavatam rasamalayam. This is how Bhagavatam begins. Just drink this nectar, rasam, this abode of nectar, rasam alayam. Pibata. Why? Shukha mukhad. Well, first, nigama talpat karor, galitam phalam. It's already very sweet. Krishna is giving us everything in this cup. So it's galitam phalam. It's a really ripened fruit. Nigama kalpataru galitam phalam. But what's made it even better is that it's mixed. Shukha mukhad amritad dravasam yutam. It is mixed with the nectar from the lips of Shuka, the parrot. And in India they say that when a parrot picks upon a mango, the mango becomes sweeter. So he's giving the same metaphor. Here, Shukadev Goswami, his name also means parrot. He's Srimati Radharani's parrot. So it's become more nectarian. So all of that we experience about Krishna, all of our history with him, all of our relationships, all of our feelings, all of our personal Bhagavatam, when we chant, when we do japa, when we do kirtan, let us try to pour it into the name. And then when we call upon Krishna, that name is going to get him running. He will not be able to resist. That is why when Draupadi says, Govinda Pundarikaksha, Krishna comes running. Because everything he has shared with Draupadi over a lifetime of relationship is embedded into that call for him. When a child cries for a parent, this is Prabhupada's classic example for chanting, everything the child has in relation to that parent is filled into that cry. And therefore, this parent has no choice but to come running. But here's something even better. Not only is Krishna's names a dialogue between us and Krishna, not only is it an exchange between us and Krishna, but it's also a dialogue between us and between me and you, between ourselves, between one devotee and another. This is actually the heart of kirtan. When we perform kirtan, that kirtan is not a monologue. The leader is filling Krishna's holy names with their best quality chanting, hopefully, and handing it to the audience. And if the audience is doing their job, they are listening carefully, and they are responding to the spirit, towards the feeling that the devotee is bringing, with their own feeling for Krishna's names. Drinking from that cup, filling it, and handing it back to the leader. There's a big difference in kirtan when it's parallel monologues and when it's a dialogue. Perhaps you've attended kirtans that are parallel monologues. The singer is not singing Krishna's names. They're singing Krishna's names, but they're not present themselves. Perhaps they're doing it for the sake of show or the beautiful music or some public demonstration, right? And the audience is not listening carefully, and they're not responding. This is why we have the process of Shravanam and Kirtanam. Kirtanam is filling of the cup, Shravanam is drinking of the cup. And both sides, the leader and the repeaters, both have equal responsibility in the case of a kirtan, for that kirtan to happen. In the best kirtans, think of the most amazing kirtan you've been in. The leader is fully present and their mood is felt by everyone in the audience. Sometimes they're calling Krishna in a very plaintive, very sad way. Other times it's like a joyful victory. I remember I was in Sadhu Sangha in Salt Lake City, and Vaisheshika Prabhu was on the stage, and he was singing this tune that he prefaced this melody, right? He said, "Now imagine that all of us have gone to China, okay? And we are," I forget what it was exactly. We are going down the river, and I think he named the river. And we are in a boat, and we're all singing together. And we're on this grand adventure in singing Krishna's names and in giving Krishna's names. And he painted this beautiful picture. And when he sang, we knew right where he was, right? And we were able to be there with him, right? We felt the same sense of adventure because he had filled the cup of the holy name with that feeling. And when we took it, we also felt Krishna consciousness is an adventure, right? It's a victory. It's something so joyful. Other times, a devotee will sing in the way of a plaintive cry, a tune so sad. No, there's no tune that's sad. It's the way the singer sings it. That is such a heart-wrenching cry that you're right there, right? Remembering everything, all the ways in which you failed Krishna, and all the ways in which you want him and you're crying for him, right? It's a whole different mood. It's a whole different presence. Shukamukhad amritad dravasamyutam. So it becomes a dialogue. Kirtan becomes a dialogue. The name becomes a dialogue between us and Krishna and between each other. This is why Krishna's holy names is the foundation of Vaishnav community. This is how we get to know each other. I don't mean this merely theoretically. I don't mean this in a sort of abstract way. I mean this truly. A community that sings and chants regularly together actually becomes a strong community. Why? Because we get to know each other's heart in a way that no amount of other conversation will get us to know. Because when we talk, we always hold something back. Maybe with our closest friends, we might be open. But otherwise, we're holding things back. When we sing and chant together, we are opening our hearts. And while there may not be a lot of words, there's only Krishna's names. Everything is revealed. Everything is shown. We're open. Open in front of the Lord, open in front of each other. This is why Krishna's holy names are the foundation of our relationship with Krishna, but they are also the foundation of our relationship with each other. And this is why when it comes time to pray to Krishna, when it comes time to call to Krishna for his protection, devotees always rely upon, they always begin with Krishna's names. If we do not have the words to say anything else, if we forget everything that we talked about yesterday, and none of it is practical, none of it is memorable, none of it is useful, we can replace it all with just this one thing. Because you can say everything while saying nothing except Krishna's names. Just by saying Krishna's names, Krishna gets it all. He knows where you're at. He knows what you actually need. He knows why you need it. He knows the pain you're in. He can feel the empathy. He can feel everything if we just give him the name. All those things that we're asked to give, we can give it through the name. So when all else fails, it's the name that's there for us. And that's what I want to share with you or show through the pages of Srimad Bhagavatam and the way that devotees pray to Krishna. I have a series of verses for you which are really, really beautiful. There's one common characteristic about these verses. They all begin with two words. Krishna, Krishna. That's it. That's how they begin. It is such an incredible pattern in Srimad Bhagavatam. I remember the first time I read the verse, Krishna, Krishna, Mahabaho, Bhaktanam Abhayankara. I've quoted this many times this weekend now, right? Arjuna's call. Oh Krishna, you are the only one who makes your devotees fearless. I was struck by the fact that in that prayer, where he offers his, he praises Krishna, he offers his obeisances, praise, and the ask. All three things are there. In that prayer, the first thing he begins with is Krishna, Krishna, his name. Once, twice. Then, reading Bhagavatam, I noticed that there's another place where a devotee says, Krishna, Krishna, Mahayogin. I thought, wow, that's interesting. Also Krishna, Krishna. And then I discovered that there are a dozen different places where we have verses exactly beginning with these two words. So let us now take off our thinking caps and just relish these verses together. Okay? So already, thank you. The first one is up. So this is, so remember, to understand better what is embedded in these Krishna, Krishna, I'll tell you a little bit about the context of each verse. This one you know. Brahmastra coming at Arjuna, no time. A lot of burning, right? Because the Brahmastra burns everything in its path. So here it is. Arjuna is speaking, Arjuna Vacha. Please repeat. Krishna, Krishna, Mahabaho. Krishna, Krishna, Mahabaho. Krishna, Krishna, Mahabaho. Krishna, Krishna, Mahabaho. Bhaktanam Abhayankara. Bhaktanam Abhayankara. Tvameko Dahyamananam. Apavargosi samsrite. Krishna, Krishna, Mahabaho. Krishna, Krishna, Mahabaho. Bhaktanam Abhayankara. Bhaktanam Abhayankara. Tvameko Dahyamananam. Tvameko Dahyamananam. Apavargosi samsrite. Apavargosi samsrite. I'll read the translation. Arjun said, O my Lord Shri Krishna, you are the almighty personality of Godhead. There is no limit to your different energies. Therefore, only you are competent to instill fearlessness in the hearts of your devotees. Everyone in the flames of material miseries can find the path of liberation in you only. So Prabhupada translates those names. Krishna, Krishna. He unpacks those by the words, O my Lord Shri Krishna. Okay, now let's move on to the next one. The next instance of this phrasing comes from the 10th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. This is chapter 10. 10th canto, chapter 10, text number 24. Now we are in the Damodar Lila, okay, and Krishna is bound with a rope by his mother, and he decides that he wants to, he's been punished for being naughty, and now he's going to do something even worse to get even for the fact that he's been punished. So he drags his grinding mortar, to which he's been tied, through the courtyard of Nanda Maharaj, finds two trees that are close by to each other, and gets that mortar stuck between them and pulls until the trees come crashing down. These are Arjuna trees, extremely tall trees. And from them emerge Nalkuvar and Manigriva. Okay? These are two demigods, two young men who have been cursed for being indecent in front of the great sage Narada Muni. And they have now spent 1,000 years or something like that as trees, waiting for this moment. Like, this was Narada Muni's curse on them and also his blessing, that one day he would see child Krishna. So they've spent 1,000 years repenting their misbehavior. They have spent a few years watching Krishna's pastimes in his courtyard of Nanda Maharaj. Okay? And now, when they emerge, they offer this prayer to Krishna. Please repeat. Krishna Krishna Mahayogin.
Krishna Krishna Mahayogin.
Tvamadya Purusha Para.
Tvamadya Purusha Para.
Vyakta Vyaktam Idam Vishvam.
Vyakta Vyaktam Idam Vishvam.
Rupam Te Brahmana Vidu.
Rupam Te Brahmana Vidu.
Krishna Krishna Mahayogin.
Krishna Krishna Mahayogin.
Tvamadya Purusha Para.
Tvamadya Purusha Para.
Vyakta Vyaktam Idam Vishvam.
Vyakta Vyaktam Idam Vishvam.
Rupam Te Brahmana Vidu.
Rupam Te Brahmana Vidu.
O Lord Krishna, your opulent mysticism is inconceivable. You are the supreme, original person, the cause of all causes, immediate and remote, and you are beyond this material creation. Learned Brahmins know, on the basis of the Vedic statement, Sarva Kalvidam Brahma, from the Upanishads, that you are everything, and that this cosmic manifestation, in its gross and subtle aspects, is your form. How different this is than Arjuna's prayer, yes? This is one of the nicest things about reading prayers in Srimad Bhagavatam, is you can see the relationship, the mood, the thought process of the devotee within the prayer. And the prayers serve as a window into their relationship with Krishna. Remember, we started the seminar yesterday by me talking about how prayers as a child were so boring and difficult. But the reason Krishna's devotees and the acharyas and Shukadev Goswami and Maharaj Parikshit love these prayers so much, the reason they take every opportunity to tell us about the prayers of Krishna's devotees, is because within those prayers is a window to that devotee's relationship with Krishna. How they understand Krishna, how they approach him. And here you see the relationship of Nalkuvar and Manigriva compared to the relationship that Arjuna has, just in the first verse of the prayers that they offer. And as you read these prayers, I encourage you to do this when you study prayers in Srimad Bhagavatam. As you're reading the prayers, think about not only what the prayer is saying, but what the prayer is telling us about that devotee's relationship with Krishna. Because by that point in the story, you've probably learned something about that devotee's background, their challenges, their connection. You know them. So now ask yourself, why is this prayer like this? What are they telling me? What kind of window are they giving me into their connection to Krishna? Okay, 10:17:23. Now, This is very special. It is a prayer by the Vrajavasis, the residents of Braj. So this is, Kaliya has just been dispatched by Lord Krishna. And this was a very intense time for the Vrajavasis. Not because they were themselves in danger, but because the very life of their life, Krishna, was in danger. And Krishna, he loves drama. And he made this whole scene very dramatic. He could have dispatched Kaliya like this, right, with great speed. But instead, he jumped in, he fought for a long time, and he allowed himself to be bound by Kaliya's his body. And he timed it so that when the Vrajavasis arrived there, the cowherd boys were there, but when Nanda Maharaj, Mother Yashoda, all the other senior Vrajavasis found out, they came running to the banks of the Yamuna. This is an aside, but do you know how they found where Krishna is on the banks of Yamuna? Because this Yamuna is long. Yeah, they followed Krishna's footprints, right? So Krishna's footprints are very visible throughout Braj. So they follow Krishna's footprints, they arrive, and Krishna times it so that when they arrive, Krishna's not dancing on the hoods of Kaliya yet. He is still bound. And this drives Mother Yashoda crazy, right? She is completely destroyed. Seeing Krishna, her delicate, beloved child, whom she is convinced she must protect. That is her duty, but that is also her love. She's just going mad. And Nanda Maharaj, everyone is holding her back. And Lord Balaram also. Lord Balaram at this point, he gives up his mood of Krishna as my brother and reminds, no, Krishna is capable of dealing with Kaliya. Everyone stay back because they are not capable of handling the poison. So Lord Balaram is holding all the Brajavasis back. Then Krishna jumps out. He dances on the hoods of Kaliya. Everyone's life returns to their bodies. And finally, after he dispatches Kaliya, the Nagapatnis offer such beautiful prayers. They're amazing, right? They offer prayers. Kaliya offers prayers to Krishna. Krishna comes back out. Everyone is relieved. And just when they think the worst is over, they decide that it's been a long day, a long night, it's a long way back home. Let's just all sleep on the banks of the Yamuna tonight, camping. And they're very happy to spend this time. Everyone gets to camp with Krishna. So they're very happy. They've been through something really intense. And just at that point, at the end of a very intense day, what happens? Forest fire. There's a forest fire that comes and starts to surround all of them. So Krishna is very dramatic and he's a little intense. And this is an intensity upon an intensity that they've just been through by the end of the day. So at that point, the Brajavasis call out. Please repeat. Krishna, Krishna, Mahabhaga.
Krishna, Krishna, Mahabhaga.
He Rama, Mita Vikrama.
He Rama, Mita Vikrama.
Esha Ghoratamo Vahne.
Esha Ghoratamo Vahne.
Tavakan Grasate Hina.
Tavakan Grasate Hina.
Krishna, Krishna, Mahabhaga.
Krishna, Krishna, Mahabhaga.
He Rama, Mita Vikrama.
He Rama, Mita Vikrama.
Esha Ghoratamo Vahne.
Esha Ghoratamo
Tavakan grasate hina. The Vrajavasis said, Krishna, Krishna, O Lord of all opulence, O Rama, possessor of unlimited power, this most terrible fire is about to devour us, your devotees. Right? So they're calling him Krishna, Krishna. They're calling him Mahabhaga. Right? You have all the opulence. You are greatly fortunate. And they're calling him Amita Vikrama, of Lord of unbounded power and strength. Okay. Then next one, 10:19:9. So that forest fire I spoke about is not the only time the Vrajavasis are faced with a forest fire. They're residents of the forest, and forest fires are a thing, as you know, here in California. So one time, this is now with Krishna and the cowherd boys. They're out grazing the cows, and the cows, they're so busy playing that they lose track of the cows. And the cows wander off in search of better grass. Things are very dry at this time. The forest fire, there's forest fires burning in the vicinity. They're attempting to protect their cows. And all of a sudden, as they're searching for their cows, they realize that the forest fire has surrounded them. And I want to actually begin a verse before that. Actually, 2 verses, okay, 3 verses. This is text number 6. Can we go back to text number 6, please? Wow, very fast. Thank you. So you'll see why I want this verse before that. So the context again is that the cows are lost, okay? They've lost track of the cows and they're looking for them. So they find them. How? This verse tells us how. Ta ahuta bhagavata megha gambhiraya gira sva nam nam ninadam shrutva pratinedu praharshita. The Supreme Personality of Godhead called out to the animals in a voice that resounded like a rumbling cloud. Hearing the sound of their own names, the cows were overjoyed and called out to the Lord in reply. Sva nam nam. Same thing, right? When they heard their names. For a devotee, this is the perfection of a devotee's life. We spend our lives calling on Krishna's names. If only once Krishna calls our name, that's the best. There's nothing better, right? And for these cows, this is what they live for. Our acharyas describe that they sometimes delay coming home just so Krishna is forced to call their names, right? Specific cows will wait until Krishna calls my name, then I will go, right? The word here used is ahuta. Ahuta, to say called. Ahuta svanamnam. Krishna called their names. You know, the word ahuta is the same as in the word for performance of sacrifice, homa, right? Sorry, you said? Yeah, homa. That same word, huta, is there. Ahuti, thank you. That was the word I was looking for. Ahuti, right? When we put something into the fire, then we're putting an ahuti. Why? It's not the putting action that is ahuti. We think of ahuti as what we put into the fire. No, ahuti is the calling that we do while we're putting in it. When we say Swaha, idam Vishnave, idam namama, this is for Vishnu, idam namama, it's not for me. Idam Shivaya, idam namama, this is for Lord Shiva, this is not for me. That calling by name is called Ahuti. So even as the devotee calls upon Krishna's names, right, every day, Om Keshavaya Namaha, Om Narayanaya Namaha, Om Madhavaya Namaha, Om Govindaya Namaha, we're calling Krishna's names, right? So guess whose names Krishna is calling? Ahuta. Krishna is similarly calling upon the names of his devotees, particularly the cows here. This is Krishna's yajna. We do yajna for Krishna. Krishna does a sacrifice for his devotees. And so this whole material world is like a forest fire, is it not? Samsara dava nalalid haloka tranaya karunya ghana ghanatvam. This whole material world is like a forest fire. All of us are in the situation of the Brajavasis. We're all surrounded by the forest fire. If you have any doubts, just read the news, right? You'll see you're surrounded, right? This temple is an oasis, but around it's a forest fire, this material existence. We're constantly feeling the heat of this material world. So what do we want? Krishna's protection. This prayer is very nice for any forest fire-like situation we might be in. This is how the cowherd boys call out to him. Text number 9, please. Please repeat. Krishna Krishna Mahavira.
Krishna Krishna Mahavira.
He Ramo Rama Mogha Vikrama.
He Rama Mogha Vikrama.
Davagnina Dahyamanan.
Davagnina Dahyamanan.
Prapannastratumarthata. Krishna Krishna Mahavira.
Krishna Krishna Mahavira.
He Rama Mogha Vikrama.
He Rama Mogha Vikrama.
Davagnina Dahyamanan.
Davagnina Dahyamanan.
Prapannam stratumarhatha. The cowherd boys said, O Krishna, Krishna, most powerful one, O Rama, you whose prowess never fails, please save your devotees who are about to be burned by this forest fire and have come to take shelter of you. This is our prayer. This is the material world. This is the situation all of us are in. And so we call. We call to Krishna, and we hope Krishna calls us. Okay, this was 19. Text 23, chapter 23. Canto 10, chapter 23. This chapter is Govardhan Leela. Chapter 23, text number 13. So this context, 23. Oh, I wrote it down wrong, I think. 10:23. Oh, no, it's the wrong chapter. It's chapter 24. Sorry about that. Chapter 24, text number 13. No. Okay. What did I do? 25? Okay. Sorry, a completely wrong chapter. At least I got the verse number right. So, Canto 10, chapter 25, text number 13. Okay, this context, perhaps I don't need to explain. The Brajavasis are being tormented by the rains, hail, hurricane force winds of coming from Indra because they have not worshipped him. Instead, they have worshipped Govardhan Hill. As a result of this, because they followed Krishna's advice, they are now suffering, right? I think this point is very crucial. Many times we suffer because we don't follow Krishna's advice. Here, the Brajavasis are struggling because they did follow Krishna's advice. This is what I meant when I said yesterday, Krishna never promises a lack of suffering in the material world. It's always going to be there. We follow Krishna's advice, we will suffer. We don't follow Krishna's advice, we will suffer. Right? It's just the nature of this world. Because there's so many types of suffering out there. Something is going to get us, right? And here the Brajavasis are surely not at fault. They've done everything out of love for Krishna, and yet here they are in this very dangerous situation. So everyone's trembling in cold and in fear. Actually, just the previous verse says, trembling from the distress brought about the severe rainfall. So you remember trembling from yesterday, right? Kampa. So now that the devotees are kampate, they're trembling, we can expect some anukampa, some mercy from the Lord. And that's text number 13. Please repeat. In the mood of the Vrajavasis, if we can enter that mood. Krishna Krishna Mahabhaga,
Krishna Krishna Mahabhaga,
Tvannatham Gokulam Prabho,
Tvannatham Gokulam Prabho,
Tratumarhasi Devana,
Tratumarhasi Devana,
Kupitad Bhaktavatsala,
Kupitad
Krishna Krishna Mahabhaga,
Krishna Krishna Mahabhaga,
Tvannatham Gokulam Prabho,
Tvannatham Gokulam Prabho,
Tratumarhasi Devana,
Tratumarhasi Devana,
Kupitad Bhaktavatsala,
Kupitad.
The cowherd men and women address the Lord, Krishna, Krishna, O most fortunate one, please deliver the cows from the wrath of Indra. O Lord, you are so affectionate to your devotees. Please save us also. Right? So here they're using Krishna's names to remind him of his duties. Right? They're saying, you're Bhakta Vatsala. You have this reputation. Now please live up to it. Help us. Actually, they're starting off by asking for the cows. Why? Because they know that the cows are extremely dear to Krishna, especially because they're so helpless, even more helpless than the human Brajavasis, right? And so they're saying, first protect the cows, and then they say, please help us also in the process. So speaking of cows, the next verse comes in this very story, when this particular verse is spoken by a cow, and a very wonderful cow, and she is Surabhi. So after Indra has repented, he wants to ask forgiveness from the Lord. He's very scared. He needs someone to soften the impact of what he fears will be the Lord's anger, and so he brings Surabhi. And crawling behind Surabhi, he begs the Lord's forgiveness. But first, because Surabhi comes first, she has the opportunity to offer prayers to Krishna. And this is text number 19. Surabhi is speaking, Surabhi Uvacha. Please repeat. Krishna Krishna Mahayogin,
Krishna Krishna Mahayogin,
Vishvatman Vishvasambhava,
Vishvatman
Bhavata Lokanathena, Sanatha Vayamachyuta, Krishna Krishna Mahayogin,
Krishna Krishna Mahayogin,
Vishvatman Vishvasambhava,
Vishvatman Vishvasambhava,
Bhavata lokanathena Sanatha vayamachyuta. Translation. Mother Surabhi said, O Krishna, Krishna, greatest of all mystics, O soul and origin of the universe, you are the master of the world. And by your grace, O infallible Lord, we have you as our master. This verse has more names of Krishna than it has any other words in it. Krishna, Krishna, Mahayogin, Vishvatman, Vishvasambhava, Lokanatha, Sanatha, Achyuta. Right? That's it. Like I said, if you can't think of a prayer, that's the prayer. Right? Let's read the purport here. It's Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur's comment. Very, very sweet. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur points out here that Mother Surabhi is feeling great ecstasy as she repeats the words Krishna, Krishna. Krishna lifted Govardhan hill by his mystic power and thus protected the cows of Vrindavan. Whereas her so-called master, Indra, had tried to kill them. So Surabhi is the cow of plenty in Indraloka. She's in the heavens, right? So she's thinking, Krishna lifted Govardhan hill and thus protected the cows of Vrindavan, whereas her so-called master Indra had tried to kill them. Thus Surabhi now clearly understands that it is not the demigods, but rather the supreme God, Krishna himself, who is her real master forever. So this is why the acharyas are so wonderful, is because they tell us exactly what's inside the prayer, right? What the feeling is in those words. Okay, last one. This is Canto 10, Chapter 49. Canto 49, text number 11. 10:49:11. So this is very special because it brings us full circle. Remember, we began this seminar early on in the seminar by talking about Queen Kunti and her particular relationship with Krishna and her expertise in offering prayers to Krishna. Queen Kunti has gone through so much in life. She remembers each one of those things at the end of the Mahabharata, just as Krishna is leaving. That's at the beginning of the Bhagavatam. She's remembering everything she's been through, and she is asking Krishna for all those troubles again and again, because throughout all of them, Krishna was present. She had Krishna's darshan. She's writing her own personal Bhagavatam. And this verse is spoken by Queen Kunti before that end point. She is right now in the middle of it. Okay? So far we've seen Queen Kunti from the end. And remember how I said how things are always clearer in hindsight? Right? We see things from hindsight and we go, Krishna was protecting me. I didn't realize at the moment, but Krishna was protecting me throughout all of that. And as we advance, the time between when the experience occurs and when we see Krishna's mercy, when we recognize it, when the narrative changes, that time reduces. And gradually, the narrative changes very quickly for us until we are able to live in a state of mercy, in a constant reflection on mercy. Well, we saw Queen Kunti yesterday at the end of this process, how she's reflecting on Krishna's mercy. Now, let us see what she is feeling in the middle of it. This is a time at which Krishna sends Akrura, who is often Krishna's messenger. He's actually, and he does this seva. And he's sending Akrura to Hastinapur to specifically with the goal of finding out what is Dhritarashtra doing and what are their latest torments towards the Pandavas, and particularly what is the condition of the Pandavas and their mother, Queen Kunti. So Akrura shows up there. He meets everyone, he greets everyone, and then he sits down with the Pandavas. And he sits down with Queen Kunti. And he asks, how are you? How are you surviving here? I know what you're going through. Why? Tell me more about it. With the purpose of relaying this message to Krishna. So she's in the heat of the troubles at this point. I want to back up a couple of verses and read from text number 9, because you really see the intensity of both her pain and her prayer in these verses. Please repeat. Bhratreyo Bhagavan Krishna.
Bhratreyo Bhagavan Krishna.
Sharanyo Bhaktavatsala.
Sharanyo Bhaktavatsala.
Paitrashvasreyan Smarati.
Paitrashvasreyan Smarati.
Ramaschamburuhe Kshana. She's saying this to Akrura. Does my nephew Krishna, the Supreme Personality and the compassionate shelter of his devotees, still remember his aunt's sons? That's her sons. And does the lotus-eyed Rama remember them also? So she's asking, does Krishna remember us, or has he forgotten? Isn't that the first question we often ask when we're in trouble? Krishna, are you there? Are you there? Are you listening? Right? So she's asking. She's saying, Krishna, are you there? Does he remember us, or has he forgotten? Is he too busy with other things? Then, next verse, 10. Sapatna madhye shochantim.
Sapatna madhye shochantim.
Vrikanam harinim va.
Vrikanam harinim va.
Santa vayishyati mam vakyaye.
Santa vayishyati mam vakyaye.
Pitarhinangscha balakam. Now that I am suffering in the midst of my enemies, like a doe in the midst of wolves, will Krishna come to console me and my fatherless sons with his words? One thing is very interesting is that when devotees pray, so often you find them praying for another before they pray for themselves. Here she asks first about whether Krishna remembers the Pandavas. Then she asks, in this verse, does he remember me? When the gopis miss Krishna in absence after he's left, and Uddhava comes, first they ask, does Krishna remember Nanda and Yashoda, his parents? Does he remember the cowherd boys? Does he remember Vrindavan? Oh, and does he remember us? Right? Only at the end. We just saw also previously with whose verse we were just reading. But there was another one. Rajavasis. Right, yes, the Rajavasis. They were asking first, can you please protect the cows? And then they asked about themselves, right? So this is a very special thing about the way that devotees pray, that advanced devotees pray. Pure devotees, is even in the midst of their greatest distress, they are still more concerned about others' welfare than their own. We see this with Srila Prabhupada. When he is on the Jaladuta, I mentioned this yesterday, but one of the characteristics of his prayers there is that he is suffering so much, but his greatest suffering, even in that suffering, of the heart attacks, feeling lonely, missing Vrindavan Dham, his greatest suffering that is still keeping him on that ship is feeling the pain of the living entities suffering in material existence. Those he is going to preach to teach, right? A devotee's pain is always first about others and then about himself. And this is how you can distinguish the prayers of those devotees who are very, very dear to Krishna, whose prayers are very special, is that even in their suffering, they cannot help but remember others first, feel compassionate, feel merciful. So let's read her prayer. Text 11. Queen Kunti goes from speaking to Akrura to shift, and she speaks now to Krishna. Okay? She shifted the person she's speaking to, even though Krishna's not there. Right? But she's so overcome now at this point with remembrance of Krishna and wondering, is Krishna there? Is he listening to me? Does he care? That instead of asking Akrura, she figures, why don't I just ask Krishna himself? Right? And that's the devotee's natural tendency, is they shift immediately. Krishna is accessible to us all. And she shifts here right to Krishna. She says, Krishna Krishna Mahayogin,
Krishna Krishna Mahayogin,
Vishvatman Vishvabhavana,
Vishvatman Vishvabhavana,
Prapannan Pahi Govinda,
Prapannan Pahi Govinda,
Shishubhiz Chavasidatim,
Shishubhiz Chavasidatim,
Krishna Krishna Mahayogin,
Krishna Krishna Mahayogin,
Vishvatman Vishvabhavana,
Vishvatman Vishvabhavana,
Prapannam Pahi Govinda,
Prapanam Pahi Govinda,
Shishubhiz Chavasidatim.
Shishubhiz Chavasidatim.
There's few people who pray as well as Queen Kunti does. She is amazing in her prayers. So translation, Krishna, Krishna, O great yogi, O supreme soul and protector of the universe, O Govinda, please protect me who have surrendered to you. I and my sons are being overwhelmed by trouble. So I hope you notice the pattern. It's quite obvious, yes? Every one of these verses begins with the same two words. Actually, the same three words. Krishna, Krishna, and then Maha. Mahayogi, Mahabahu, Mahabhaga, Mahavira, right? So these devotees are in trouble. So they need Krishna's complete power and his complete shelter. And so they all begin with his holy names. Krishna, Krishna. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the sum and substance of prayer. That's it. That's everything, right? Our ability. Prabhupada says, if just once we can call out the name of Krishna sincerely, our life is perfect, right? It's just once. That's all it takes. Just once. And in case once doesn't work, the devotees here have done it twice, right? Krishna, Krishna. Second time, right? Just to make sure that Krishna listens to their sincere prayer. So the holy names of Krishna, we have discussed today that Krishna's holy names, what's in a name, right? What's in a name? That was the question we began with, Juliet's question. What's in a name? And today we have seen that a name has so much. Everything that these devotees have for Krishna is present in these prayers, and it is present in the names they call upon Krishna. A name in this world can be problematic, can be painful, can be labeling, can be ostracizing, can be separating. A name can divide us, hierarchize us. It can make us feel small and useless, but not in relation to Krishna. Krishna's names are aprakrita, non-material. They are swabhavika. Why? Because Krishna is the only absolute person, and therefore the only person to whom the name Aham applies. He is the only one who can say I, with no you, No he, no she, just I, because he includes everything within him. Krishna's names are a way of identifying him, of distinguishing him, of recognizing his spiritual qualities. This is why Krishna has so many different names. And this is why when devotees name Krishna, they are saying that Krishna is mine. He belongs to me. Just as when we name a child, that child belongs to us. Just as when the guru names the disciple belongs to the guru. So when the devotee names Krishna, Krishna belongs to the devotee. And therefore, because that name distinguishes Krishna's qualities, the devotee is able to pour everything they have into Krishna's names, into that relationship with Krishna. And that name itself becomes the best form of dialogue with Krishna, and therefore the best type of prayer. Because in that name, the devotee offers his or her feelings to Krishna, and Krishna responds by pouring everything he has into his holy names. That name then becomes the basis for community amongst us as well. As we chant Krishna's names together in kirtan, we too are putting what we have for Krishna into his names and receiving what our fellow devotees have. In this way, we understand our heart. This is the best form of dadati pratigrihnati, of showing love by giving and receiving. What better thing to give and receive than Krishna's holy names? And we see this, therefore, in these prayers over and over again. Every prayer involves Krishna's names, but these ones we talked about have this special characteristic, that the devotees begin with Krishna's names. They start right there, Krishna, Krishna. Thank you all so much for your attention today. Hare Krishna. I don't want to extend this session any further because we are already half hour over time. So we'll conclude here. But if devotees have questions or things like that, I'll be available after the class for a little time before I have to leave. So I just want to conclude by thanking everyone so much for your attention today over these last 2 days, for giving me your association and inspiration. Truly, truly, you have filled your cup and given me so much to drink and to relish. I will relish it for the rest of this year and part of next, and looking forward to your association again in the near future. Krishna willing. Hare Krishna.
Radhika Raman Prabhu, we know that your calendar is packed full, not only with academic activities and also spiritual invitations and from temples all over the world. But you make your time to come to ISV and to enlighten us, enthrall us, and educate us on many unknown facets of Srimad Bhagavatam. And we look forward to your visit every year. And thank you again so much for coming this year. And we are so eagerly waiting for the event next year. So thank you, Radhika Raman Prabhu. His Grace Radhika Raman Prabhu ki. Thank you, Prabhu. Hare Krishna.